चन्द्रशेखरे रति
Thank you very much. With that very beautiful Shiv Tandav Stotram, we begin today's program. And I very, very warmly welcome Miss Niloshri Biswas ji for our very, very special Mahashivratri conversation on the city of Banaras, captured very beautifully by Niloshri in her book called Banaras, and let me show it to everybody. This is her book, Banaras of Gods, Humans, and Stories. A very, very finely narrated book capturing everything that one can capture about Banaras from the ancient to the contemporary. Is it a city of myths and mysteries? Is it a city of legends? Is it a city of sacred geography? Is it a city of landscape? Is it the city of our imaginations? What is Banaras actually? We will be speaking to Niloshri about everything that Banaras is as a city seen from our eyes, seen from the eyes of travelers and tourists, seen from the eyes of kings and queens, seen from the eyes of paintings and palaces, seen from the eyes of priests and pilgrims, seen from the eyes of saints and sinners, seen as a point of beginning, the oldest city of the world, perhaps, and seen as a point, as a place where it is believed that if you die, you reach, you obtain salvation and you reach heaven. So, with those words, I very, very warmly welcome Niloshri Biswas ji and all our very, very lovely audiences, because this session is definitely very, very special, because it is quite by serendipity that we were able to schedule this session today on the occasion of Mahashivratri. And that means a lot to me, especially to be able to pay my own very, very special, humble gratitude for being able to do this today on this very, very special day, because Banaras, after all, is the city that Lord Shiva and Mata Parvati, have bequeathed to our generations to revere and to enjoy and to understand. So thank you very much, Niloshri, and a lot of our audiences have also joined today our session. It will be a good occasion for you to say a little hello, and then we formally introduce yourselves for our lovely audiences and delve into the conversation on your very, very beautiful book. And I'd also like to mention Mr. Irfan Nabi, who has, captured, or rather provided the very beautiful photographs which go absolutely brilliantly as an accompanist to the text that Niloshri has written about the city of Banaras. And the fact is that there are some very, very rare facets in terms of the photographs which I had not seen before, which allude to what Banaras is from Niloshri and from Niloshri's perspective, thought perspective, and from Irfan's lens. So we will be talking more about that. But first, Niloshri, your time to say hello to our audiences.
Hello, audience, and hello, Mughda. It's absolutely wonderful in this sacred morning to join everybody here. I feel very privileged to be a part of this discussion. The book has been a long journey, and I am most delighted to share some anecdotes and whatever you have in your questions to answer them. It will be absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I am really grateful to Jaipur Literary Society, IS Literary Society, for inviting me for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's indeed our honor and privilege to have you with us today on this very, very special occasion of the Mahashivratri. So, giving a formal introduction to our guest, Niloshri Biswas is an author and filmmaker who was trained in comparative literature from the Jadavpur University at Kolkata. That is where her initial schooling and college took place, and later she did her education in cinema. So she's a trained cinematographer. She's a trained cinema person. Her interests include history, cultural studies of pre modern colonial South Asia, and early Hindi cinema. Though she's not very comfortable speaking the language, but that's very interesting. Her works, both film and writing, have appeared in various print media and screened worldwide, including at the Cannes Film Festival. Broken Memory, Shining Dust, her prominent documentary has been archived by the Oscar Library. Her earlier book, also co authored with Irfan Nabi on Alluring Kashmir, The Inner Spirit, has found home in the Library of Congress. Currently, she is working on her next book on food stories during the British rule in India, and I'm sure this is going to be also a very, very nicely and interesting book to pick up later for discussion. I would also at this point like to introduce Irfan Nabi, who has provided, as I mentioned earlier, who has been the photographer for the beautiful narrative that Niloshri has written about Banaras. And it very nicely complements the story, the anecdotal story that she has woven. And Niloshri reminded me that she thinks that Banaras is a character in her narrative. So it is a person. That is how you have to see, and that is how you have to feel the city of Banaras. So Irfan Nabi studied in the prestigious Irish Catholic Burn Hall School in Kashmir. He photographs often and writes intermittently. His images have been part of major exhibitions in Amsterdam, Washington, Kolkata, and New Delhi, among many other cities around the globe. He has shot and traveled solo across various terrains. Indulgence in food and music is what keeps him going in his spare time. A book on Ladakh is in progress. Culturally nuanced photo elements are what his lens seeks. So, with these words of introduction about the book Banaras of Gods, Humans, and Stories, let us begin at the very beginning and ask Niloshri about the book. Although before the conversation begins, she was asking me, so what brought you to Banaras? How did Banaras happen, and why Banaras? Tell us something about the making of this book and the journey with this book of Banaras, and what fascinated you about Banaras that you wanted to write a book about Banaras. And why a book on Banaras? Why not a film? Should we expect a film sometime later on the book? Maybe do you plan to convert? So everything that has brought you to Banaras.
See, interestingly, what brought me to Benares first was a film that I was working as an assistant director way back in mid 90s. And the film was about the five elements of Hinduism, and I think that particular stay during the film shoot has been absolutely the base of kind of getting me glued to the city. The city, as I had felt then, obviously in mid 20s, too many years ago, was there was something adventurous about the city at that point of time. We had a very rigorous schedule of film shoot, and in the late hours of evening, when my director used to call it wrap up for the day, we younger lot of the crew ventured out on the streets of the city, and that is exactly where, as a documentarian, I realized that this city is exceptionally, uh, it has a very exceptional character in terms of its stories. Whichever way you look around, there is something to explore more, right from the tea stalls to the temples, to the pilgrims visiting, the relentless flow of the visitors in Godalia and in Dashashwamedh Ghat. So all of that, and of course the food, which I had been a foodie. I'm from Kolkata, so goes without saying. I have this uh, absolutely biased way of looking at a city because I see it from a food lens also. And Benares is absolutely on top of the charts. I though I come from Kolkata, and Kolkata is so famous for sweets. I don't think anywhere else in India you get such absolutely out of the world dairy products and sweets other than Benares. Absolutely mind blowing food and all this put together. I came back from the shoot, but as I have written in the book, the city didn't leave me. I kept going back, and every time I went back, I realized that I've not known it at all. I need to come back again. And that's how our last couple of years ago, after Alluring Kashmir was done, and we were thinking of other city history kind of a proposal in the series, is we had 3 4 other cities in mind, and which are equally which have equally historical background, or they have the heritage aspect, high heritage aspect. But we thought that it would be absolutely wonderful to start working on Benares, because Benares is something which is like the microcosm of India. So it is something which we really wanted to do, and I initiated the project. I started my research, and the more I researched on the city, the more I went back to the city, I almost felt, which I have written in the conclusion, that it's almost like a puzzle. And I'm not sure whether I could really decode the puzzle, but I have taken a huge dive, and I have done it the way I interpret it.
No, I must say, Niloshi, it has been done very nicely, and you're absolutely right. Though it may be a puzzle, we'll try and unravel the puzzle today as much as we can, moving from one section to the other, because I think the book Banaras is difficult because it has this beauty. You've mentioned so many things. You say it's sacred geography. You say it's Ganga. It says Ghat. It's almost like the elephant with the 7 blind men. Everybody who touches any part of it thinks that that is Banaras for them, but that is the beauty of Banaras, because it leaves you with the lived experience, and whichever part of it, you will take back something of Banaras with you. Mark Twain has said that Banaras is older than history, older than tradition, older than legend, and looks twice as old as all of these parts together. That is how beautiful Banaras is, and I think everyone gets attracted, because I think Banaras for me is like a magnet which keeps calling you back again and again and again. तो शुरू करते हैं. A little bit of it will also be in Hindi for the benefit of all those audiences, but Niloshri is comfortable answering questions in English. So tell me, you have mentioned about Banaras, how you got engaged with Banaras since the very first time in 1979, and it took you about 3.5, 4 years maybe to do your research, to write the book, to get it published. Having written the book today, and you say it is like Banaras is like a puzzle, what is that aspect of Banaras personally for you, which holds some importance and which makes you go back to Banaras again and again? What is your understanding of Banaras? Everybody will have a different understanding of Banaras, and you've tried to capture different parts of Banaras. So, what in your understanding is when you say Banaras? What do you understand by Banaras? What do you understand by Banarasi? What do you understand by Banarasi Pana, which you have mentioned? And you also say somewhere very nicely that, and that is a question that I'll also like to ask, which also you have asked in the book, that has Banaras always been the city the way that we look at it today? Uh, so tell us your understanding of Banaras, and tell us how the city of Banaras has evolved in the understanding of everybody who seems to know Banaras.
For me, I think I will continue to go back to Benares forever because of its people. And by people, I don't mean literally people, I mean the Banarasi Pan, the unique behavioral pattern that a resident of Banaras, and I have mentioned in the book that this behavioral pattern gets transmitted to people, or it gets slowly, it seeps to people who visit Banaras frequently. Like for uh, in the many visits when I was working in Banaras, I started getting drawn to the small outings that Banaras do. They will suddenly step out of their house and they will go to the local tea stall and have a chit chat and a conversation. Although it's a very male space, but I had my friends there over months, over years. My friend circles became very strong, and I used to go and sit down and hear people talk. I mean, most mundane stuff. Somebody's talking about their land, somebody's talking about what kind of yield they will grow. Oh, somebody's talking about the music school with which they are affiliated. So all kind of discussions is happening, and by the time you return home, you have no clue of time. Then all those evening outings where you would go to the ghats and you would just sit down, and maybe far away there is a temple aarti going on, or maybe people are chit chatting. There is a sudden call of a nimbu chai wala. There's something very amazing and striking about the atmosphere, and you can really sense the sight and sound in a way that you don't perceive in anywhere else in the subcontinent, or even in Asia, I would say. It's very distinct. It makes you kind of look, hey, what's going on. So for others, it is what's going on because they may not be used to the local culture. For us who live in this country, Benares has been a part of our collective memory. As for Kolkata is concerned, where I'm born and raised, not a single Bengali family he has ever not been in Benares. Benares is actually, Kashi is the second home of the Bengalis. And that is a dialogue which even in the master filmmaker Satyajit Ray uses in his Elephant God in the film that I mentioned, which as a child I had watched, and it's somewhere in a child's mind it had left a mark. And even from 79 to 90s, when I first went there as an adult, it was a whole lifetime of a gap. But that whole idea of Jai Baba Felunath, as we see the film Black and White thriller which he makes, and he explores through the city. And that whole notion was in my head when I first reached there. Of course, it got kind of some of it got replaced by my own understanding. But definitely it was a starting point at somewhere. Coming back, that even in the film and even in my later visits, my engagement point always started with the people. A master karigar, or a master artisan, a weaver, a musician, and a tabla artist, a percussionist. Ustadji's house, his family, like Bismillah Khan's house, his family, his sons, nephews, who are in music, who are not in music, innumerable people who I have met who possibly own a small shop, a grocery, somebody who supplies snacks for son, all sorts of people from all stratas of life. They have bound and they have uh, dotted my journey and my engagement with Benares. I go back to Benares for them.
Yeah. So actually, it's people who make the city. Very rightly mentioned that, and you've also done a comparison with how Kolkata is different from Banaras. This also allows me to, at this point, bring another city or maybe another state. कहते हैं बनारस के बारे में कि सुबह ए बनारस and शाम ए अवध. That's how they used to define what happened in UP. The sun would rise in Banaras and set with the entertainment and with the Bajid Ali Shah's Awadh, that Avdi culture. But there is another city, another place that has a very important role in the making of Banaras, and that is Jaipur. and Bundi and Rajputana and Rajasthan as we know it. And it is very interesting that, because you mentioned Kolkata, I thought I'll ask you this question now. Can you speak about the connect that, Rajasthan has had with Banaras? And it is very, in many way, interesting that we are doing this conversation from Jaipur today, and that connect also needs to be explored. Because when I was thinking and when I read your book, I found there are five things which are very, very interesting, and you must speak little more about those five things. One is, of course, the Kachwaha dynasty has a connect. Rajasthan, the kings of Rajasthan have a connect with Jaipur, which also contributes to the syncretic culture that we speak of Banaras. Then, when you look at Kathak, Banaras has a Kathak style, Kathak Gharana of Banaras. We have a Jaipur Gharana in Kathak. Then, very interestingly, the Jantar Mantar, the five Jantar Mantars, one Jantar Mantar in Jaipur, which has survived, and one Jantar Mantar, of course, in the Mahal, that the observatory that the king of those times in 20, Raja Savai Jai Singh II, made. So that is another connect. And the third important connect, which I'm so grateful to you for bringing out that fourth connect that the Gulabi Meenakari, which is very, very special to Banaras. Please talk about all these things which connect the city of Banaras so beautifully with the city of Jaipur and with the feudal times of the olden times of Jaipur and underlying this conversation that we are doing today.
Rajasthan and particularly Jaipur and Jodhpur, these two regions, these two territory of Rajasthan had been deeply interlinked with Benares. As Benares, the other identity which is very important for me is a craftsman's city. It's a city full of kadigars. Also, one of the primary reason for that is that Benares had been in history one of the thriving, one of the ever bustling trading hubs. And because it was a trading hub, and because it always had patrons who were interested in crafts, there were many artisans who had traveled in different regimes to Benares. They have made Benares their base, and a huge section of them were from Jaipur and Jodhpur, particularly in the jewellery sector, which is reflected through Gulabi Minakari and also weaving in to a large extent, and as well as metal work. Other kind of jewellery work, the fine jewellery work, as in the jurao and the stone setting and things like that. That I I personally think that the prominence of Rajasthan started kind of taking a uh, full what would I say? A, uh, you can really see the impressions of Rajasthan from some time during Akbar's period, because his court had that huge syncretic uh, relationships with Jaipur and with Rajasthan, Rajputana itself. So Mansingh and Todarmal, both Rajasthani nobility, they had kind of made sure that they make Benares also a second administrative place where they would park themselves for certain months of the year. Todarmal had his Haveli in the heart of the city, which is till date called Chowk area. Every Banarasi, every visitor has to go to that area to do their shopping, in to pick up beautiful Banarasis is or anything else that they would even like to buy, or maybe a symbolic lota which they would try to take back home, things like that. And Benares is equally famous for its brassware and all. On the other hand, these two people were also instrumental in bringing Vaishnavism in the city, because they themselves were worshippers of Krishna. And Banaras, as you know, the other name of Benares is Abhimukta, the place which is never forsaken, and it is a city of Shiva. It is believed that Shiva on earth dwells in Benares. They the colloquial saying, the local saying is always, even today, everybody reminds of this saying that Kashi ke har kankar mein sankar baste hai.
Hmm.
Right. So that is how Shiva is perceived in Shaivite domain. In these are the two ministers who brought in the culture of Vaishnavism. We have the Bindu Madhav temple and other Balaji temple and temples which are in different form. Representational of Krishna's as devotees and Krishna's different forms. So this is how I think Rajasthan first bonded with Banaras, Jaipur first bonded, and then continued connection with the central court, the federal court in Delhi and Agra, and different smaller nobilities coming and making Banaras a place to live. The huge number of Brahmapuris is like the training of Sanskritized students who wanted to train into a Sanskritized life, who wanted to learn the Quran, the sacred texts. Their training, those schools were largely patronized by people from Rajasthan and the nobilities from Rajasthan, and to be very specific. And that's how I think that continuous engagement kept happening at manifold levels, at a religious level, at a spiritual level, at the more functional object art levels. And then I would definitely, as you have said, Gulabi Minakari is something which is exceptionally brilliant. It shines, it outshines in all adornments of jewelry across India. Gulabi Minakari is one of the most amazing form of craftsmanship, and the whole enameling work is so distinct to Benares. The earlier enamel work, which I have mentioned in the book, had a palette of all pink, violet, purple, and that kind of a color. But with time it has been sorry with time it has been kind of taken in up the new colors, yellow, red, green, etc. And it's fascinating how the whole craft, which was once diminishing, which was almost getting extinct, was totally revived by the craftsmen, the different families, and a huge patronage was given to the karigars by the trading section who had their ancestry in Rajasthan, the Khatris, the trading caste people who made Benares their base, and how the jewelry got the craftsmanship, it got a revival, well, a facelift, and a terrific facelift that it is one of the most important crafts that goes out of India now all over the world, and it has made its own space and distinct space to that. So
Yeah.
Rajasthan is everywhere. Rajasthan is almost everywhere. Wherever you look around, you find fine layers of Jaipur and Rajasthani imprints totally there, totally rooted in Banaras.
Yeah, so actually, in many ways, the way you mention it, it looks as if Jaipur and Banaras are, in many ways, twin cities, and a little heart of Jaipur resides also in Banaras. And so grateful we are doing this conversation today. Somebody has written कि गंगा के धारों की रौनक जैसे एक सपना सा लगता है अनजान कोई भी हो बनारस सबको अपना सा लगता है. So it looks like a city which belongs to everybody, a city with a lot of apnapan, as you've said, a city which replicates and reflects the qualities and characters of Shiva Mahadev himself. But we will talk more about that since we are in the conversation talking about cities. Niloshri mentioned the connection between Kolkata, Benares, and Jaipur, Rajasthan, and Benares. There is another city, and we will also touch a little bit on the contributions made by the women in the making of the city. And I think that is also something very beautiful I had no idea about, and I would like you to talk a little bit about that. But before that, a little comparison. When I went to Seattle, which is city up in the north, and they have preserved the underground city of Seattle, there is a story that the seamstresses, The people who used to stitch dresses, the tailors, basically the lady tailors of Seattle, saved the city because they had huge amount of money which they had made stitching garments for the rich. And every time Seattle either faced floods or fire, these ladies actually contributed the money towards the rebuilding of the city of Seattle. And that is how Seattle has survived till today, facing ravages from the water, facing ravages of fire, various earth elements, elements of nature. And when I was reading the contribution that the three queens that you mentioned, and like you to speak about that, because there should also be the subaltern history of the making of Banaras through the contribution of women. I'm really interested in that part, and that was very beautifully done. And interesting thing is that all the three ladies that you've mentioned were widows. So वो भी एक बहुत खूबसूरत आपका मुझे लगा कि एक वो है. And I would like the audience to know a little bit about the three stories, the three women that you have captured in your narrative.
I think of the three ladies, Queen Aholabai Holkar, her is most prominent, of course, because she is the one who kind of rebuilds the Kashi Vishwanath, which is Visheshwar temple. Well, and by all means, that's the most important site in the city. And her contribution comes from the fact that she was a very astute Hindu widow, and she wanted to kind of make her presence felt in the contemporary political backdrop. So, one of the important things which these women, powerful women, understood that if they had to make a presence in the statesmanship, they would like to do something which draws attention at the heart of India. By that I mean that everybody, all three of them, had decided to contribute something in Banaras which will make them a part of the memory forever. So, having said that, Vallabhai actually was the first one to initiate the making of the temple, and she did that. She also, to do that, she also had made a palace where she stayed, which is now very. It's not distinct for the fact that Gauchashimad Ghat takes the entire area, but there's a slice of the Ghat which is also Ahalla Ghat, which is named after the queen, and she used to be based there. She was one of the prominent patrons for not only Vishesha temple but a lot of other temples like Tarokeshwar temple in Manikarnika Ghat, or lots of Brahmapuris, as I said, because students were learning, Brahmin students were learning in the scholarship. The Sanskrit scholarship were being taught, they were getting trained in reading and understanding the entire world of sacred literature. So she had in fact, her connect with Banaras is very deep. He, along with her, you have Baijabai, the queen of Gwalior, who also had contributed to the Ganbapi praying, making the Ganbapi reconstructing the Ganbapi well, and the most fascinating mythological anecdote associated to the well, and although Baijal's contribution is not, I don't think it's remembered that much, but her contribution is also equally important. I think Pahlabai's contribution is more remembered till date because of the temple association, the prime temple association, also because everybody contributed to her initiative, like Ranjit Singh in Raja, the Sikh king, Ranjit Singh donating her the dome, the golden dome. One of the key reasons why she would make the architecture so distinct is that she wanted to, which I mentioned in the book, that she wanted to make it look very simple and yet very distinct. So Kashi Vishwanath temple's architecture is very different than rest of the many other temples. And then the lady who surprised me was the Queen of Natur, which is in Bangladesh now, Rani Bhavani, who the poet and author and nationalist Bankim Chandra had mentioned in a fictionalized way in Anandamath, but his novel. Well, and she had come to Kaki because you may be knowing that Bengali widows, and more so from the noble section, from the upper section of the society, once they were widowed, they of course were sent to Kashi, and many of them came to Kashi also. Oh, the queens and the women zamindars, because many of them had huge land holdings back in Bengal. So they came there and they decided it, unlike Bhavani, there were smaller Jamindar women also who had decided that they would build temples. Bhavani's contribution is so important because she made the Durga temple and also the Chandi temple in Bangalitola, which is so distinct in its architecture. And I think the primary interest of all these women were also to find a footing in the very male dominated political space, in the male dominated society, where they needed to make their footprints as powerful women who had a decisive power of their own, a decision making power of their own. So I think this was the primary mindset, and because they were very pious people, they were very religious. So their way of engaging with the politics had a part of them in contributing and making to the temples and going all out to make their presence felt. They were devoted people who used to be based in Benares for quite a few months every year, and between their state where they ruled or the places where they ruled, they used to visit Benares very frequently. And I think the religious part was a kind of an engagement between their own interest with the larger politics as well internal engagement.
Yeah, in fact, that is what makes Banaras very, very interesting because everybody finds something of interest for them in Banaras, be it political interest, be it self preservation through Banaras. So, Banaras has been, while people have made contributions, they've also used the metaphor of Banaras for. Self-aggrandizement in many, many ways, if we can see that. But coming back to the paradox that exists in terms of the sacred and the profane that coexist in Banaras, I think this is the metaphor that you must talk about: the syncretic culture, the coexistence. At one, hand, you have the Dashavatar Ghat. The other place you have the Manikarnika Ghat. One where Brahmaji did the sacrifice of the 10 horses, which is represents political conquest, and then you have Manikarnika, which is believed to be a place. If you die at the Manikarnika Ghat, if you are burned there, it is supposed to allow you to obtain nirvana. So it's the material and the spiritual coexist in Banaras. Then when you talk of the Kashi Vishwanath temple, you are talking of sacred geography, you are talking of religion, you are talking of Kashi Kshetra and Siddha Kshetra that coexist. Then you come to the casualness of the city that wanders, that wakes up languidly, and the city which has the Asi Mohalla in it. So you have Kabir at one point represents Sufism. Then you have Sarnath in the background. Then you have a ghat which is made by the Jains. How is this coexistence made possible in Banaras? How does Banaras, what is it in Banaras? What is the DNA? What is the chromosome, as you say, in Banaras that allows this coexistence to take place, to coexist the way it has, despite time and space How has it been made possible? Since you have a very, very close association with Banaras, how do you view this? And what do you think is the DNA? Where does this come from? And how do you think it's changing now? Is it changing now? Or does Banaras have that kind of a magnet to hold it all together? Your views on that?
I won't be able to say whether it is changing or not, because for me it is always going to be syncretic,
Hmm.
because that's how I see it, and that's how I kind of have sensed it always. The whole idea that Benares is a melting pot is very important for me. I mean, it's in no other city that you have the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb being exhibited in this way. Everybody seems to be finding their own alignment with the city. If there is a Kabir, there is a Tulsidas. If there is a Pandit Jagannatha Raja, there is Bharata Harishchandra. So there are all sorts of literaries, poets, singers, as musicians, all kind of people who are completely drawn to Benares in their own little way. And that I think is the khasiyat, that I think is the uniqueness of Benares. And when you take this individual element, and when you actually kind of expand it to the community. There's not a single community who doesn't find their space in Banaras. The Jains have been a very big part of it. The Buddhists have been a very big part of it. The Muslims have been also a part of it in one way or the other. And then of course it's a Hindu city. So everyone is there in their own way. One of the key reasons why this coexistence could happen, in my own understanding, is that every regime in Benares had some openness or the other, which included people like the Kashi Naresh, the royal family of Benares. They at one point their divans were Muslims, hymns, and even before that, because you have mentioned Awadh, in Mir Rustam Ali, who was the governor of Benares before the royal family of Benares took over, or before Balwant Singh's family took over. So even in his regime, people from different communities were allowed for a free mixing, for a free engagement, free flowing interaction. A lot of this goes to the artistic community, to the musician, to the dancers, to the poets, who had been the catalytic element to tie up everybody together. You will never come across a Banarasi of whatever faith or whatever background who is not bound to the city by this thread of culture. That is very important, and that is Banarasipan. That's so unique, extraordinary, and brilliant. And you will never be able to find something like that in any other city in our country. That's really Banaras for me.
Yeah. So Banaras means more people travel outside of people who wander about, people who loiter about, of the wandering minstrels. I'd like to read a little paragraph from, Kashi Nath Singh's Kashi Ka Asi, because that's the other side of Banaras, which also talks about how beautiful the city has come together. It says, जो मजा बनारस में है ना पेरिस में है ना फारस में है इश्तिहार है इसका ये इश्तिहार दीवारों पर नहीं लोगों की आंखों में और ललाटों पर लिखा रहता है गुरु यहाँ की नागरिकता का सरनेम है ना कोई सिंह ना पांडे ना जादो ना राम सब गुरु जो पैदा भया वह भी गुरु जो मरा वह भी guru. So this is basically what Niloshri has been talking about. Also finds resonance in what other people like Kashinath Singh ji have written about Banaras, not in a very sacred manner, but in of the profane that exists in the sacred. Let us also talk about the sacred geography that you've mentioned. And any talk about Banaras as a temple city is also incomplete if you don't talk about the Ganga and the Ghats. And you very rightly and very beautifully mentioned that Ganga is the Pran Dayani of Banaras, and it is also the purifier. So it is a city which welcomes saints and sinners alike. Talk a little bit about the Ghats and Gangas and how it gives a distinct flavor to the city of Banaras, and how Ganga allows it to be viewed differently by painters and poets and photographers. And tell us also about some anecdotes that you might have come across regarding the coexistence of Ganga and Banaras.
Ganga is integral to Banaras. Sometimes you may question which is more important, and then you will, the answer lies as is that there is there is hardly any way to kind of segregate uh, Ganga from the city. So they both are equally important. I mean, other than Shiva, these are the city itself, which is known as City of Light, and the terrific water flow. Oh, the absolutely relentless power of that water is integral to the city. To me, it has two facets. I mean, for me, the one aspect is the spiritual aspect, which is down in the mythology, which we already know how Ganga's importance transpires when she reaches Banaras. That I'm not going at the moment. The other identity is that if the city, if you close your eyes and imagine Benares, will you ever be able to think of the city's visual representation minus the flowing river or those staircases is or those stone steps, and that representation is embedded in our head and mind, and this representation, this artistic representation, which was very much there in its literal form, took shape in artists' canvas towards the colonial period. It slowly was, it was kind of uh, depicted in various painters' drawing. I have mentioned few of them, including the Daniels, the E.B. Havel, the British and the European watercolor painters, as James Prinsep, uh, who was posted it in Banaras Mint, who has huge contribution in creating the artistic shape, artistic visual representation in our current eyes. I have not seen a single popular public material, a calendar, a postcard, a book cover, which doesn't include a row of temple spires leading to the ghats and the river and people sitting as a part of any illustration which wants to depict, or illumination which wants to depict Banaras. It is so integral. It is absolutely integral. And I think the other aspect of Ganga is that it is the reason why Benares became such a prosperous trading hub right from the ancient times of Gadavalas and even earlier than that. And Benares was always a place of commerce. If it wouldn't have stood on the waterfront, how would it have had its own identity? So, in a way, Benaras's own identity is so deeply related to the presence of the Ganges.
या एब्सोल्युटली राइट. गंगा और बनारस जो हैं वो एक दूसरे के पूरक हैं. बिना गंगा के बनारस नहीं है, और बिना बनारस की खूबसूरती के गंगा का आनंद नहीं है. वो जो बजरा राइड है, गजरा और बजरा जो है, बोथ एग्जिस्ट. The महफिल खानाs that you have mentioned, the dal mandis, they all exist because the city cannot be considered in parts. It has to be understood in a very, very holistic sense. Now that you are a foodie, Niloshri, and that is one section that I've really enjoyed. And of course, all women are buyers of craft. So, two aspects that you have touched in the book. You've mentioned that place where you went to see the Muslim weavers and you saw some very, very ancient and traditional pieces of Jardosi work done on Banarsi silk saris. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that because I think Kotwa is what you mentioned. I also had the occasion to go there, intermingle with the crafts people, and learned so much and saw such beautiful craftsware. So that is something, that craft tradition you must touch about, because बनारस जो बनारसी है वो बेसिकली उसकी साड़ी भी एक बहुत ही आइकॉनिक सिंबल है ऑफ बनारस. दैट इज वन थिंग. एंड अदर आई थिंक इज द पैलेट ऑफ फूड cuisine which Banaras offers. And somebody has very rightly said that Banaras is a city of long, prolonged breakfasts. So you have a breakfast for people who get up at 4 o'clock. There is a breakfast for people who get up at 10 o'clock. There is also a breakfast for people who get up at 1 o'clock. So that is the wide variety. So cover that, these two aspects about Banaras for us and the audiences.
I will start with the food part. Of course, food is very close to my heart. So, uh, there's ongoing kitchen in Benares. Like round the clock, things are being cooked, things are being served, and things are being consumed. There is not a single occasion when a Banarasi wouldn't eat. Even in the most saddest kind of a moment of kind of bidding goodbye I to the dear ones. At the end of the ghat cremation and the last rites, so a small motley group of people would go and have a, in the cooler a small portion of the tea, and that would give them the energy and the literal nutrition to possibly beat the grief. That is how integral food is with the city. The other aspect which I think, and it's my own interpretation and I stand by it, I think it's a city of Shiva, and Shiva was always a wanderer. If you go back in mythology, he had a very distinct food habit. His food pattern is very, very distinct. He is somebody who 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 is said to consume a lot of milk based products. He's a frugal eater, and he can live and sleep anywhere. In fact, there's a term called bhojanam jatra tatra. I mean, he can eat anywhere, and he actually is a Samshan Basi, so he can go even and park himself in a crematorium, in a Shamshan, which he does because it is believed that his presence is there in Manikarnika. He's omnipresent and he's also present in Manikarnika. So this entire business of having food at any point of time is a very deeply rooted to the character of the city. And I think the character of the city is very closely related to the Lord of the city. So that way it is intermingled. It's very, very intermingled. As I said, that any point of time at 12 o'clock, I have seen people stepping out at night and going and having a plate of chaat. At and the chaat shops are all open throughout the night. And then very early at 4 o'clock, before the Subah Banaras program, which has started very recently in Asighat, even at that point of time, you will find somebody having in chomping on to a very delicious plate of kachori or puri and aloo ki sabzi, or in fact begin with rounds of chai or malai, the garam doodh and the malai and the rabdi. It's an ongoing process and absolutely fascinatingly related to the nature of the city. If you don't want to connect it with the mythology, but you have to connect it with that behavioral pattern. It's so interconnected with the city's behavior, how it responds to nutrition. And you may have read in the book that there is nothing called home in Banaras. The street is equally important. And going out and hanging out in the street is equally important. That is so much of Shiva's behavior.
Hmm.
So it's a kind of a mortal replication of what the Lord does as in his way, in his form.
Yeah. So that also reminds me, Niloshri, with a city in Rajasthan, which also has a very similar culture, maybe for different reasons though. Bikaner also has this culture where people step out of their homes and talk, engage in conversations, and that culture is known here in colloquial language as the Pata culture, which basically means that they sit on the platforms outside their houses and converse, and that somehow continues from ancient times even to now, and that is the defining motive of the city of Bikaner, and it's also a very equally laid back kind of a city. So having said that, one interesting thing is that you mentioned that Banaras lends itself to the public. Its gullies and mohallas also have a very distinct charm. People get up in the morning, fill water from the Ganga, come back. You have temples inside the houses in Ganga, so in houses in Banaras. So the what is the ritual and the religion and the spiritual coexist. It's not different. Banaras gives you a template where there are no silos, and where there is no value judgment happening on what is good, bad, be it the language, and that is also somewhere reflected in the festivals and the melas that you celebrate. There is this holy celebration of Holi is very popular. Apart from Mathura, where they have a different kind of Latmar Holi, in Banaras you have a different kind of Holi where Shiva is, remembered in his linga form, and there is mushairas and there is Kavi Sammelan, which happens in Holi. I'm sure you've seen all of that. I've only heard and very intrigued to go and see. But then there is also the very, very sacred and ritual, all illuminating festival of the Dev Dipavali, which happens. So again, the profane and the sacred links the city and the people. What are your thoughts on this kind of a city? How and why this kind of a city should not become a template for other cities? We talk of Chandigarh as being a planned city, but isn't this template of Banaras being a city which is open, inclusive, and accepting, become a template for all other cities where it is safe to be out on the roads, where roads, as you've mentioned, is home for people. इसके बारे में कुछ कहिए.
I I really would love if Banaras gets replicated. But then if Banaras gets replicated and it becomes a master template kind of a thing, the charm of Banaras will be lost. Banaras is unique and Banaras is extraordinary, and that it is a DNA which has an extraordinary chromosome. Home is so important for Banaras to hold its identity. It's we would rather not replicate Banaras. मतलब उसको हम अकेला ही we should let it be because it's so unique. It's like a cherry on the cake. अगर हम हर केक के ऊपर चेरी डालेंगे तो केक का मजा चला जाएगा. So having said that, I think we will let Banaras be unique. About Holi, which is upcoming, like in couple of days, Holi will be there. Banaras actually records a lot of festivity. Some of them culturally important, some of them religiously important, and one of them is it has its culture is also deeply rooted it from the soil where it stands. It's in eastern UP. It's extremely fertile lands around,
Mm.
and it has a lot of agrarian influence, a lot of influence from the land in celebration of seasons. Celebration of seasons is a very important aspect of Benares, particularly spring, because you have to remember that for a farmer, a spring is a very important time. A spring summer confluence is the time when he is reminded that he can sow the seeds and new life will begin. So that way Benares has this whole it has always uh, allowed spring to be celebrated in a big way. So Holi is integral to that, and celebrating Holi through its music, which is distinct, the Kajri, the Chaiti, all those those kind of forms of music which is so synonymous to Banaras, the musharas, mahfils in those days in 18th and 19th century. So I think not specifically Holi, but the whole phase of Holi is so important, and it's driven by people. I have elaborate descriptions of the bajras and decorated bajras of the musicians singing all through the nights, as at least 3 to 4 days of that festival of Durva Mangal, which takes used to take place on the third Tuesday after Holi. So you can see right from Holi till next 21 days. So you can imagine the carnival kind of a mind space of the people, well, and their amazing energy to celebrate life, to celebrate the advent of the spring, and absolutely मतलब उसमें वो मगन हो जाते थे. I mean that kind of a feeling is there in all festivities, but particularly spring. And then of course the Dev Deepavali, which has now resurfaced as a very important calendar day. I mean, thousands and thousands of people visit the city. That's, I think, one of the highest footfalls on that day in a given year. And the city looks extraordinarily beautiful. इसमें तो कुछ बोलना ही नहीं है. I'm sure you may have visited it on the Dev Deepavali days. I think the book has photographs, some brilliant photographs of Dev Deepavali. My own personal favorite, of course, is a solitary man lighting up the entire Manikarnika Kund on the day of Dev Deepavali. So I think it is the power of the light and the mundane which continuously coexist. And यही उस शहर की खासियत है कि कोई भी एक लेयर, it doesn't leave a single element out. मतलब एक large hearted city है वो, where everyone is accepted, and that is how it should remain. मतलब अगर हम उसको टेम्पलेट बना देंगे ना, उसमें वो जो बड़प्पन है, मुझे लगता है, ये मेरा पर्सनल ओपिनियन है, कि वो निकल जाएगा, उसका जो खासियत है वो चला जाएगा. लेट बनारस बी a type of one of its kind in the entire world.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And how beautifully you mentioned Banaras as being equivalent to Badappan. This will be remembered. Large-heartedness of the city and of its people, exactly like the large-heartedness and magnanimity of the founder of the city, Mahadev. And today, in celebration of Mahadev and Mata Parvati getting married today, why don't you speak a little bit about something that you very briefly mentioned but did not touch about? You intrigued us with the Gyan Vyapi well. You said there was an anecdote. Would you like to share some stories about Banaras that have really influenced you and that have intrigued you equally?
I would let that story to be read, but my favorite story I will share of how I think that it's a very amazing story. At one level, it is so deeply related to human life as well. I love the story how Lord Shiva has a confrontation with King Daksha. And it is on the day of marriage how he burges in the court, and how Sati is completely in love with this her husband, her would-be husband, and she says that I will only marry him. So I love the question answers between King Daksha and Lord Shiva. And how King Daksha humiliates him and what he says, and Shiva's response to that, and how the girl who has decided, the divinity who has decided to marry her lord, is stuck to her choice of this man who actually doesn't have any materialistic possession. That is the deep spirituality that I see the idiom of Shiva, the narrative of Shiva being positioned, that you must be extremely humble and devoid of material possession, and in your route to spirituality, in your path to spirituality. In that way, Shiva is an inspirational character, or in the sense, for once, if you move back from the divinity part of it, if you see that it's a story of a human couple, of a mortal couple, it's absolutely fascinating that how there is no class, no caste, no material position, and only love that binds these two people. And back into the divine part of it, he only bows his head to Annapurna. Like there are innumerous paintings in Kalighat Pot school, other school, where we see him bowing his head and seeking for a morsel of rice from her. So that way also, it's a story. It's a terrific story. It's a terrific element in the mythology, in the religion, that makes you think that, okay, all these gaiety and flashiness is on one side, and here is this supreme power, who is so grounded.
Yeah. So I think you are absolutely right, and that's where also the city attracts you like a magnet, wants you to get immersed in it, in the Ganga probably of all experiences, and then also asks you to remain detached and untouched, because then there is the Manikarnika of detachment. So all of these three elements coexist, and have been captured very, very beautifully through pictures by Irfan Nabi and through the textual narrative and storytelling craft that Niloshri Biswas has done in her book. I have also a very favorite story, which is a very popular story, and I think I'd like to dedicate that story. I'm sure all of you know it, but just want to say it from this platform to end this conversation. And that is about Lord Shiva and Lord Parvati. Shiva, as you know, was a very detached person, and Parvati was the more loving one. If I can use Auden's poetry, let me be the more loving one. And she deliberately drops her earring at the Manikarnika Ghat, thinking that probably in wanting Shiva to search for a lost earring, she will get to spend more time with her man. And then there is the serpent that comes, that famous thing. The serpent is always there in the Garden of Eden and also in the Manikarnika Ghat. The serpent comes and takes away the earring, so that earring is always lost, and there is always this search. And I think Banaras represents that search, and it is not just the search of the city, but also the search, our own individual quests in life, in existence. And it is believed that anybody who goes to the Manikarnika Ghat in search of themselves or in search of the earring are bound to be asked by Shiva, have you found the earring? Which basically means it's an existentialist question. So Manikarnika Ghat is as important as the Asi Ghat, where morning begins in Banaras, or the Dashamavtar Ghat, where we spent our evenings in Banaras. So I think that is the beauty of Banaras, which Niloshri has very, very beautifully captured in her book. One great thing about her book is that it looks like a coffee table book, reads like a beautiful story with so much of history, so much of culture, and so much of research that she has done, and also accompanied very nicely without the photographs standing out, the photographs alluding to the beauty of the text. So it is a very, very complete package, a very beautiful book to read, and I'd like to show it for the audience, and I hope we have been able to do justice through our conversation on this book. And I open the floor now with these words of gratitude to Niloshri and Irfan for coming together and doing this book. It also intrigues me and wants me to go back to their other book, Alluring Kashmir, and read that, because again, Kashmir is also a very, very fascinating city. Some observations, ma'am, which have been made. Sarojini Hoon is a very dedicated retired professor from the Rajasthan University, and she also mentions another connect that Jaipur and Banaras have through the people. She says that Rajasthan University's Vice Chancellor, Dr. Iqbal Narayan, became the Vice Chancellor of Banaras University. And of course, we have not spoken about the culture of education through BHU in Banaras, which I'm sure there exists. एक मैगी कल्चर भी है, I'm told, at night, where the students of BHU go and like roam on the streets. Avinash Tripathi is a filmmaker and he teaches and writes about films, and he's asking a question. What is the one thing which makes Banaras very different from other cities? If you could elaborate, Niloshri, ma'am.
I would again repeat, I have only a single sentence answer for this. I've never seen a large hearted city more than Banaras. And that ability to welcome others makes Banaras what it is. And I hope that this will remain the unique element of Banaras and make it always distinct in time immemorial. Absolutely make it completely timeless. Yes, this is the distinct quality for which I will go back, and this is for me the highest quality that Banaras has. Very distinct, extremely brilliant, extremely perceptible for anyone who who would want to fall in love with the city.
Surikant Jodha is also, he's an agriculturalist, does organic farming, but is deeply interested in history and art and painting. And he is asking a question. He says, what was the reason behind Shiva choosing Kashi as his abode? Please share the story.
It is said in the Puranic text that before Kashi becomes a city, it was Anandavan. It was a place which had the blissful forest full of flowers, a kind of a description that you may have with heaven in a kind of a forest area with birds, with animals, with flowers blooming, beautiful crystal clear streams, hymns flowing, and a sense of prosperousness, a natural prosperousness to the place. And that is how it acquires the name Anandavana. When Shiva decides that he would dwell on earth, he really is fancied. He takes fancy to this place, and that's how Banaras becomes his abode on earth. This particular Anandavana, I have realized, has a lot of similarity in its description in Kalidas's Shakuntala. So it's actually that kind of a ambience which Anandavan has, a peaceful, a calming atmosphere which compels Shiva to choose it as his place on earth.
Yeah. So there is Venkat Raman is a professor. He teaches at IIM Indore, and he wants to know, ma'am, which will be the special month in the year to visit Banaras?
I would say for me, the best months are between December and till Holi, because technically the weather is beautiful, but and the good part of it is that you are being able to travel and will not feel exhausted in traveling length and breadth of the city. And I think that's a good time, and that's a good time. I would like to avoid the summer months, and but if anybody has a kind of a particular purpose to visit the city, vis-a-vis the religious purpose to visit the city, then maybe you can attempt for the Mahashivratri particular period of time, or even the month of Shravan, which is also a holy month, and a lot of pilgrims, a lot of devotees come during that point of time.
Yeah. So we have one more longish kind of a question from Swati Vashishta, who is a freelance journalist, and probably you also reached out to her and invited her. You know each other on Twitter, I'm told. So she says, fascinating conversation. Thank you for this, Niloshri and Mughda. Curious about what goes into the making of a city with strong syncretic traditions that sustains itself despite the odds. I'm inclined to think it has to do with the cultural capital the city has accumulated over the years. But what were the factors that may have facilitated what I'm curious about?
As I said, and I would again repeat that there's not a single regime in last 1000 years or so. I'm taking a rough calendar period for our convenience, where the patrons or the rulers have not initiated some kind of openness. Is so in last 600 years, if there was as making of a temple, there was also a culture of building up the local music. If there was an inbuilt kind of making of any religious structure, at the same time there were palaces being built. It's again, if you go deep into it, it's the distinct and the mundane. It's the distinct and the mundane, and it's like the warp and weft of the weaving process. That on one hand you have the mundane elements which make the fabric of the city. On top of that, you have a layer of special things happening to the city, which actually is building up, and it's been cumulative over the period of time. A lot has to go to Mansingh and Todarmal, who had mapped the city at that point of time. And so we have city planning happening, and city planning has also helped in a way that how the people's traffic will move around. Everything is has to reach the temple and the Ganges, so the city is planned that way. A consciously planned the bazaars, the markets, and once there are bazaars, there are beautiful musicians, both men and women, and you have poets who will meet at chalk area. And if there are poets and musicians, the ancillary industries will grow around. So there will be the brass and bell metal people, there will be the weaving community. So it's like I have mentioned the word mandala in the book. It's like if you look from the sky, if Kashi Vishwanath is the center of the mandala, everything has the concentric circle around it. So that's how I think that concentric circle, if in mundane term you expand, that is what is syncretic about. It's interconnected.
I think it's somewhere the quality of the people that have grown and accumulated and learned and interacted from the city, and also probably the qualities of Shiva that have allowed the city to be what it is today, syncretic in its nature.
I I don't think that Banarasis threw away anything. Whatever they gathered from each regime, in from each person's contribution, they accepted it, they included it. There is an element of inclusiveness is in Banaras, which is hard to see anywhere else, apart from the fact that it has a primary identity. It has never disregarded its syncretism. As I shared to you that the Kashi Naresh family had included people from other faith and community as a part of their administration. If there was a Kabir, there was a sinner like Pandita Jagannath Raja. If there was a Tulsi Das, then there was somebody else also in the contemporary time. So this whole balancing out of the whole thing, I think, has been very important for the making of the a city, for the character of the city. And till date, I think that is what it holds as its uniqueness. I mean, uska jo bhi punji hai, the asset which it has is lies in that syncretic culture.
So that is the ethos of Banaras for all of us. And we will end this with a lot of gratitude and a deep sense of gratefulness to Niloshri for doing this book, and to all a lovely audience for asking us such beautiful questions. There's a young poet, I think I'd like to quote her, called Ayushi Singh. I saw her somewhere on the internet, and she says something very beautiful about Banaras, which encapsulates the gist of what it is and what we have done today as part of this conversation. It says, Banaras ki kahani likhun ya khud ki, बनारस की कहानी लिखूं या खुद की, एक मेरा हिस्सा है, दूजा मेरा किस्सा है. So we have spoken about Banaras in terms of what Banaras is through the stories that Niroshri has shared with us and through the photographs that Irfan has captured of Banaras in the book. So thank you very, very much, Niroshri, for doing this lovely, beautiful conversation with us, taking us to Banaras, striking connections of Banaras with Jaipur, Rajputana, and the people of Jaipur and Rajasthan who have joined us on this conversation today. I'm sure most of will at least try and pick the book and read, or maybe if not read, at least go to Banaras and experience the city of Banaras from their own understanding. Banaras offers so much for all our senses. There's visual delight, there is the jingling of the bells, there's the aarti, early morning aarti, there is something that happens on the cart in the morning and the evenings, and of course there is a whole a la carte for the palate as well. There is touch, there is sound, there is things to see. So enjoy yourselves. And today, being Mahashivratri, I dedicate this conversation at the humble lotus feet of Lord Shiva. Thank you very, very much. Once again, very, very grateful. And also want to announce from this platform that please block your morning on the 5th of March for another conversation, which we'll be doing. We will be talking about China and how China sees the world and how we understand the world from China's point of view. And we will be in conversation with Professor Venkat Raman from IAM Indore, who's also incidentally joined us today as an audience. We will be talking with him on the 5th of March, 11 a.m. on the same platform. So thank you very much, Nilosh. I'm very, very happy to have read your book and to be in conversation with you. Thank you very much once again. And to everyone else who joined today on
Thanks.
this very, very special day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mugdha. Thanks so much, the lovely audience. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you. Bye.
So much. Bye bye.